Welcome to the Grace Period, where we get real about attorney mental health and well-being and pull back the veil on the high-stakes world of big law. I'm your host, Emily Logan Studman, a commercial litigator, partner, and someone who believes that there's always room for a little more grace, even in a high-stakes profession. Here, I share real stories from my own journey in big law and invite you behind the scenes, beyond the billable hour, to talk about what it means to stay human, even in a demanding field. Whether you're a lawyer, a legal professional, or someone trying to find your footing, this space is for you. Let's pull back the curtain, start the conversation, and find our grace period together. Disclaimer: the views and opinions shared on this podcast are mine alone and do not necessarily reflect those of my firm or any organization. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not legal advice. Listening does not create an attorney-client relationship. Today is episode 60 of the Grace Period, the last episode of season 6, and I want to talk about boundaries. Boundaries. This was not a word I think I had heard before I joined big law. It wasn't something that was necessarily modeled to me, especially by my mother, who always said yes to everything and worked herself to the bone, taking care of us, taking care of everyone else, and in pursuit of her career. I admire her, but I also want to do it differently than her. And that's how I feel a lot of millennials and those coming up behind us feel. We want to be rainmakers, power brokers. We want to have these big sustainable careers, but we want them to just be that, sustainable. We want to bring our whole human selves to the job and to our families and our hobbies and our other interests. To do that, you have to have boundaries. But if you're like most big law associates, you've probably been told either directly or indirectly to never say no. You're taught that great lawyers are always available, always responsive, and always willing to say yes. I fall into that. I do that. I take on matters. I worry that if I say no, I won't have enough work. And the truth is that mindset is a fast track to burnout, resentment, and worse client service. Why? Because you can't perform at a high level by taking on too much. You can do everything, but you cannot do everything well. Boundaries are not selfish. Boundaries are not lazy. They protect your time and your energy. They protect your ability to deliver your best work, to deliver and make sound decisions, and to actually enjoy not just your life, but also your career. When I set clear boundaries around my time, my energy, and my attention, I'm a better lawyer, colleague, and human. Boundaries help me focus. They help me make fewer mistakes. They help me show up for my clients and teammates with more clarity, more focus, and more presence. But again, this isn't easy. I often slip into the habit of saying yes to every request, no matter how last minute, no matter how unreasonable, no matter how chaotic. I struggle with believing that will help me get ahead. And to a degree, it does. But there's a tipping point where you take on too much and you don't pay attention to all the details. Balls fall, things fall through the cracks. You get behind on priorities, you're exhausted and even resentful, and ultimately your work suffers. And so do you as a result. So how do you start setting boundaries? One, you have to identify what your non-negotiables are. For me, that's sleep. I'm very, very serious about my sleep. And it's protected time for deep work blocks. You cannot revise or draft a brief without focus blocks on your calendar. Non-negotiables are: what do you need to function at your best? Next, communicate expectations early and often. Let clients and colleagues know when you're available and when you're not. Example, I'm going to be offline tonight, but I'll respond first thing in the morning. Example, be specific in your out of office messages and hold yourself to that. Use your out of office message as your boundary that reminds you and others when you will and will not be available. Practice saying no or not yet. A sample script for that is: I really want to help you, but I need to wrap up this task before taking on yours. Or, I really want to help you. Here's what I have on my plate. How would you prioritize? Or, you say you need this by Thursday. I think I can get it to you by Friday. Does that work? Make it a conversation rather than just saying, no, I can't help you with that. Iterate and adjust. Boundaries aren't set it and forget it type things. You have to practice them and you have to finesse them over time, learning what works for you, what works for your clients, what works for your family, what works for your supervising attorneys and partners. Check in with yourself and your team regularly to see, are these boundaries working? Now, if you're like me, You will feel guilty setting boundaries. That's normal. But remember, boundaries are not barriers. They're bridges to better work and a more sustainable career. When you protect your time and energy, you protect your well-being. And ultimately, that means you protect your work product, your clients, and your teammates too. If you're struggling to set boundaries, start with one very, very small one. Protect a single evening. Block out one specific hour on your calendar for deep, focused work, or use a more specific out-of-office message. You have permission. You have the ability to protect your energy and your time, and ultimately your future excellence. Boundaries aren't just allowed, they're essential. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Grace Period. Remember, you don't have to choose between your well-being and your ambition. By setting boundaries, building supportive habits, and giving yourself permission to pause, you can thrive in law and in life. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. That is the path to our grace period. Disclaimer, the views expressed here are solely my own and do not represent the official policy or position of my firm or any organization. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, not professional or legal advice. It does not create an attorney-client relationship.